Hey there, and welcome to episode 20 of Jazzy-Bytes, the video game channel where we talk about all things video game related, with me, Jazz. I hope you're keeping well. So this episode is going to be the start of a very special journey. I'm going to be talking about a video game series that I am so passionate about, a video game series that I love above all else, almost verging on obsession. I am, of course, going to be talking about the Final Fantasy series. It would have been impossible to have covered all the games in one video, at least for me anyway, so this is going to be part 1 of my Final Fantasy retrospective. Hopefully by the end of it, you'll appreciate why I love this series so much. Just of note, there's going to be a fair few spoilers for the previous games, so you have been warned. And incidentally, I'm going to be mostly using PSP footage for this video, and it's only because I find the PSP versions of Final Fantasy 1, 2 and 3 just to be a little bit more digestible. Enjoy! Final Fantasy is a Japanese role-playing game with a fantasy setting developed and published by Square in 1987. It was the brainchild of Hironobu Sakaguchi and released on the NES. Sakaguchi had been wanting to make a role-playing game for a long time, but the developers simply refused to let him. When Dragon Quest became a hit, however, this was reconsidered and Sakaguchi was set to task creating his RPG. Only 3 colleagues volunteered to join his team due to his managerial reputation, but eventually a team of 7 staff, referred to as the A-Team by Square, were working on the project. Final Fantasy takes place on a world with 3 large continents. Elemental powers of the world are controlled by crystals, 4 crystals in fact, which represent the 4 elements: earth, fire, water and wind. Numerous inhabitants reside in the world of Final Fantasy, with everything from humans to dragons to robots. Story-wise, 400 years before the start of the game, the Life-Finesse people, who used the Wind Crystal to create technology and a space station in the game known as the Floating Castle, have watched their country fall to darkness as the Wind Crystal grew dark. 200 years later, there were violent storms which sank the shrine belonging to a powerful water-based civilization, and again the water crystal grew dark. The earth crystal and the fire crystal both followed in turn, devastating agriculture across the world and setting wildfires across the land. Lucan, the sage, then tells of a prophecy that 4 warriors of light will come forth and save us in a time of darkness, ultimately against Garland, the first of the enigmatic antagonists of the Final Fantasy series. Final Fantasy was a starting point for the series. Although the games developed in leaps and bounds over the following years, this had the introductions of conventions that would stay with the series for years to come, such as a turn-based battle system, a party of characters, crystals as a central theme, and small heroes changing the course of history. As there were no set ideas for Final Fantasy II, it went in a fresh direction with none of the previous characters' storyline or world present. Thus began the tradition of each new Final Fantasy game being a fresh iteration of the franchise. Character development is fleshed out with Firion, a resident of Fynn, and the main protagonist. Maria is an archer and sworn enemy of the Empire. Guy is a monk who communicates with animals, and Leonhardt is a conflicted Dark Knight. Temporary characters join and leave the game throughout, another trend that followed in later games. The story starts when the main characters are attacked by Palamatian Black Knight soldiers and left for dead. Princess Hilda, who has established a rebel base in Altair after her kingdom of Fynn was invaded by the Empire, rescues our heroes, but denies them joining the rebels due to their age. After a short adventure involving betrayal and the death of the princess's fiancé, Hilda allows them to join the rebels before they are sent on further missions at her request. Ultimately, this takes them on a journey to defeat the evil emperor at Pandemonium. Final Fantasy II introduced many series staples that were here to stay, including Chocobos and Sid, but more on him later. Final Fantasy III sees four orphaned youths drawn to a crystal of light which has revealed itself after a nearby earthquake, and the youths consequently go back to their families and are sent out into the world to restore balance. Final Fantasy's main draw is its characterization, and this is no different. We have Lunith, who symbolises courage, Ark, who symbolises kindness, Lunith's best friend Refia, who symbolises affection, and Ingus, a loyal soldier who represents determination. Again directed by Hironobu Sakaguchi, the games are well established at this point and selling well. Turn-based combat remains in place, but is enhanced as a combination of elements are used from the first two games. It's the first game to introduce special commands such as jump and steal, along with the first game to feature one of my favourite things about Final Fantasy, summons. Summons are massive creatures that can be called forth to help in battle, a common element in RPGs. Summons have played an important part in Final Fantasy, from assisting in battle to being integral to the storyline in later games. There are a total of 8 summons in Final Fantasy III: Chocobo, Shiva, Ifrit, Titan, Odin, Leviathan, Ramu, and Bahamut. Well, thank you for joining me on my Part 1 Final Fantasy Retrospective. This is a game series that I love so much, with deep narrative, amazing storytelling, fantastic characters, and graphics that are just great. Guys, take care of each other. You can appreciate a little bit of my passion for this series now. Hit like, subscribe, your support is always appreciated. Take care of each other, and peace out. So that's how you beat Kraken.